Hi, my name is Aaron, and I'm 24 years old. Originally from Ohio but relocated to San Francisco not long ago. At the moment, I'm in that strange area between apartments obtaining freelance work as a video editor. It's nothing special, but it pays. The rent or whatever. Would I if I owned a property in San Francisco? Costly. So until I acquire anything reasonably priced, and I've been lodging wherever I ended up crashing with Can because of Bobby. I met you through one of my clients. He's a cool 23-year-old architecture student. And plays the guitar as though he's making a bad impression in a stadium, but with assurance. We weren't particularly close. Enjoy new acquaintances who click right away. I informed him that I was caught between. He simply shrugged and replied, "Crash. My mother won't stay at my house for a few days. Care." Thus, it began as a few evenings. That first night was Bobby introduced me to his mother, who is laid back. Hannah appeared much younger than I did, expecting to be in their early 40s, but to be honest, she could have been a slim woman in her mid-30s. Confident in herself and the type of lady she is when she speaks. "Who keeps your eyes on her?" Greeted me as if I were an old friend. Dinner and made a joke about how old I looked too. She was spending time with her son. We had dinner. Watched a film and briefly discussed she made numerous requests for editing work. Inquiries, but it didn't seem more intrusive. I crashed as if she was actually interested. One evening, feeling grateful on the couch, meeting someone is not something you do every day. Mom and feel at ease right away. Something changed the following morning and I woke up, early, perhaps at 7. The home was calm and still. I strolled into the still trembling. I went to the kitchen to get some water. I saw her, Hannah, when she was asleep. Was standing with bare feet and hair near the sink. Still wet as if she had just emerged from she took this silky navy shower. Robe with a slack waist tie that wasn't precisely illuminating, yet it just left sufficient to pique interest in her, twisted a little, and smiled gently at me. She said, "Morning," and reached for a mug. I responded in the morning, attempting to seem more alert than I felt, and I'm attempting. She poured some coffee and avoided staring. Sleep, leaning back against the counter. All right. The couch was really rather lovely. "Comfortable," I said, opening the mostly in the fridge so I didn't have to look. My heart was thumping a little at her. Quick for comfort. When I turned around, she was observing me but not in an unsettling manner. Stable concentration, then she cocked her head and inquired, "Do you gaze at me all the time? Like that?" She replied, and I froze. Her eyes were serious despite a small smile. She didn't laugh. She wasn't kidding. I couldn't take my eyes off my face. Heat up, I didn't intend to look at her. She took her coffee, still held my attention as I took a drink. Look, I simply stood there, and she never mentioned she minded. Uneasy and unsure about what to do with myself before I was able to decipher it. "Yo, coffee," said Bobby, yawning as he entered. Rubbing his face, he muttered, "Just like that, something flicked." Hannah turned like nothing, returning to the counter. She said, "Just made it." And I sat down and got a glass of water at the table as though everything was completely normal on the inside. But I was humming. The remainder of the day went quietly. I relaxed with Bobby, and we played several games. Went for a stroll and discussed random. Hannah pretended that everything was, as usual, pleasant and courteous. Previously, but each time I glanced in her direction, I spotted her lying that night. While glancing back, I'm sitting on the couch, looking up at the ceiling. Repeated what she had said. "Do you always?" She wasn't taunting when she looked at me like that. Her voice carried a deeper meaning. Something that awaited a genuine response, and I didn't give her one. The following Bobby left in the morning because he had an early class. He threw his keys on the counter and promised to return. Lunch, so I was by myself. I nearly sat down, sort of on the couch with my laptop open, creating a wedding film for a customer, kind of dozing off up in Cleveland on TikTok. I lost focus, and my thoughts. Often returning to the kitchen too, the way Hannah stared at me and her voice around 9:15. She posed the query. Someone was coming down the stairs, and I heard it. Looked up and saw that Hannah was wearing tight old sweatshirt and black leggings. No makeup, hair in an untidy bun, and in some ways, She appeared even more attractive than the day before, another effortless morning. She smiled and said, "Good morning," to which I replied. She entered the kitchen with a pouring. She inquired if I had any coffee and got herself some. I hadn't eaten yet, but she offered to make. I wasn't sure if I should have eggs and toast. Say yes or no, so I went with certain. Just the two of us ate at the dining table. Of us initially, my employment involved light work. If I ever did. How long had I been editing? Considered a career in Hollywood. But then, her inquiry began to get a bit more intimate. I got someone back. In Ohio? No, I replied, slowly chewing. She said, used to didn't work out. She gave a slight nod as if she understood, then inquired, I don't think you're the type of guy someone leaves with ease, I said, an uncomfortable giggle. I'm not that intriguing. She gave me a direct glance. Believe you are. There was a day when we were silent, so I turned away first. She dropped it and changed the subject, asking if I might assist her with bringing in some boxes, just old junk I've been keeping in the garage. With the intention of giving, she casually added. Indeed, 10 minutes later, we were confronting a heap of objects in the garage, dusty crates, which we moved slowly. Not due to their weight, but the area was little, so we continued to brush past one another whenever one of us moved. It seemed nearly too near. She once dropped a tiny box full of with books and stooped to retrieve it. Instinctively turned aside, but not before observing her body's curvature, the sleek curve of her back as she moved with a serene assurance when she got up and looked at me, saying, "There it is. Once more," she uttered quietly. There wasn't a. This time, I opened my eyes to hear her joke, lips poised to utter anything. However, every phrase that sprang to mind sounded either unintelligent or overly candid. I'm not adjudicating, she remarked, interjecting a bit closer. I just want to know what's going on. I'm not sure I should go through your mind. I responded, answer that. Shoving a crooked, why not? She asked, smiling and raising one eyebrow. I responded, because he's my friend. And she nodded, slightly good response, and then she reached out and removed a little of the dust off my shoulder lightly and slowly as they passed. I moved toward the door as if nothing had occurred. For a moment, I stood there acting as though organization of a stack of books, but my hand was. Later that day, a shaky Bobby returned home. He wanted to show me a couple in the afternoon. Creations. On his laptop, we spent time together in the living room. His mother passed a couple peaceful, informal moments, yet nothing was uttered. Whenever I get a glimpse of her, I could feel her gaze lingering on me from below, either beside the kitchen or in the hallway. Maybe it was just me, but dinner was off. We all sat at the table as she prepared pasta. Bobby conducted the majority of the conversation. Hannah chuckled about school-related topics, and a few remarks were inserted here by right spots and there, but I hardly even looked at my direction, which in some ways made it worse. Bobby asked if I wanted to after we finished our meal. I told him to come to a friend's party. He didn't push it because I had things to do. Simply shrugged and left at around 9 o'clock. I returned to the sofa and opened my around 15 minutes later. The laptop began editing once more. After a few minutes, Hannah entered holding a glass of red wine in the living room. If you need me, I'll be in the den. Anything, she uttered before continuing to walk. Thanks. I nodded in response. After a few minutes, I heard gentle jazz begin. From the rear of the home, I'm playing, continued working, or I made an effort. I quit eventually. I'm not even sure why. I moved toward the hallway, but why? Slowly, and took a brief break before I moving in the direction of the den the door was. She was on the couch, legs cracked open, nestled beside her, leafing through a book, done working, but not really. She looked up. She cocked her head to observe me for a beat. Then, why have you come here? She paused, just wanting a rest, and put the coffee table with the book on it. She asked for a break from editing. From attempting to ignore, my mouth went dry, and I wasn't sure how to react. She smiled softly once again. Calm down. I'm not, I laughed nervously, like I was about to bite. Really did not anticipate any of this. Me either, she uttered softly. And then she looked down the corridor and said, "If you want to know if he will spend the majority of the evening." I gave her a serious look. She said, almost in a whisper, after looking, I said, "You can sit if you want." I'm not sure how long we sat there together. We didn't speak for another 15 minutes. A lot. She continued to pretend to read, and I continued to feigning ignorance of how near our legs were occasionally our knees. Felt, and neither of us backed down. A gentle murmur of jazz music filled the backdrop. A leisurely, smooth sound. She held the glass after taking a drink of the wine. Out to me. "Want some?" I hesitated. Yes. She gave it to them as if it were nothing. I took a tiny taste and returned it. It was okay. "Just trying to fill the space," I said. She grinned between us and said, "Italian wine goes best in quiet company," I said, nodding. The music was not as loud as my pounding heart. I continued to steal peeks at her. One shoulder of her sweatshirt slid off, her mouth's slight curvature when she observed me staring. It seemed an excerpt from another person's narrative. Someone more audacious who didn't consider 2 times, and then without looking, she replied to me, "You ever consider what could occur if you go too far?" I swallowed. "You know you shouldn't." At last she turned to face me and said, "Yeah, think you could live with it after?" I replied. Glared at her and muttered, "Depends on what's waiting on the other side." She looked at me for a few moments. Felt her attempting to read me in order to discover the reality I was omitting. Then she stood, grabbed her wine, and uttered, "I ought to get some rest." I nodded. Probably wisely, she strolled to the door stopped there, and Good looked back. "Good night, Aaron." She entered the corridor and made my way upstairs. I lingered a bit longer on the couch, attempting to reduce my respiration. Eventually I arose and returned to the living room. I opened my laptop once more without touching it. I simply sat there and gazed at the blank screen. I woke up at midnight to hit the restroom while walking down the hallway. I noticed something on her bedroom door. Wasn't completely closed. It was only open enough to reveal a gentle glow leaking. I continued to walk outside, but Aaron was halfway to the restroom when I heard it. There was a whisper, and I halted almost immediately. She spun around, finding herself standing just almost invisible behind the door. She didn't push it through the small opening. Wider just answered, "I wasn't invited in." "You're still up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said. She nodded slowly in response. Then in a lower voice, "I've been thinking approximately earlier. So have I." She paused, then lowered her voice even further. I walked over and said, "Come here for a second." My chest was thumping with her heart as I paused when I got to the door, but she opened it. It's sufficient for me to pass. The only source of light in her room was a lamp. She was standing next to the bed in a loose. Her mid-thigh was covered by a gray t-shirt. No mask or makeup, just her unvarnished and intimate. She was perched on the bed's edge. With my legs crossed and a glass of water in my hand, "I doesn't typically act in this manner," she remarked in a low voice. I stayed where I am. Not a boring housewife in search of drama. I'm not attempting to ruin your. I am aware that she took a slow. I simply cannot recall the last time I breathed. I felt seen for a while before you arrived. And all of a sudden, I feel important. Moved a bit closer. You are important. She raised her eyes, which were suddenly shiny. Don't speak. That until you and I are both certain. Then it occurred. She gently reached out and dragged me down in her direction, and our lips touched. It wasn't quick, but it was soft and uncertain. It was everything we hadn't had, not just lust. Uttered the words, finally slipping aloud. We shared a kiss that seemed to eternally, after which she leaned back and closed the door after me, so I followed suit. The remainder of the evening passed slowly. Whispered whispers and quiet touches extended, tense silences that require and something that is dangerously near to being real link. At one point, lying adjacent to, I muttered to her in the dark, "What are we?" Even so, she gave a quiet response. We will likely regret this, but not tonight. No, not tonight. She shook her head. Bye. I woke up early and sneaked out of her room prior to Bobby's opportunity to. He was still unconscious when I woke him up, trying to get rid of the weight for a time. Everything felt heavier in my chest. Somehow, it's also brighter and more genuine when I returned. She found herself in the kitchen, pancake flipping as if nothing had. Morning, she said suddenly. Morning! With a casual grin, Bobby entered, directly behind me and gave me a back slap. Mom's pancakes, I hope you got some sleep, are legendary. I took a seat, and Hannah put a platter before me, grinning as though she had 2 days ago, and I just now realized what that smile indicated that it was now ours. Silent secret that only the two of us know. When the peaceful Friday morning arrived, Bobby was circling the house while preparing for he had discussed a weekend trip earlier in the week of his college vacation friends in Miami, but I hadn't gave it a lot of thought. But now, every second, felt heavy as he prepared. Are you certain you don't want to come? He inquired, stuffing socks into his backpack. A lot of I shook. You could edit poolside. I lied to myself. Got a deadline Monday? Can't afford to fall behind? Enough, he said. Please don't set the place on fire while I'm. He departed in the afternoon. Hannah was upstairs as he yelled his farewell. Didn't descend. The front door shut. After a period of silence, I heard footsteps. Down the stairs steadily and slowly. I glanced up from the sofa and took a stride appeared with baggy jeans and a soft tank top with a laundry basket attached, similar to everything went according to plan, yet did he not leave? She inquired without, yeah, I answered, maintaining eye contact. She offered a slight nod and passed the A-minute from the living room into the hallway. Afterwards, I could hear the water flowing in the eye followed the noises she made in the kitchen. Strawberries being rinsed in the sink. Want a few? She looked at me from the side and asked. I moved slightly closer to the side and said, Do you? She didn't respond immediately because shut off the water and placed the bowl down, and eventually turned to face me. The space between us was no longer lighthearted, it was serious. I didn't sleep because of something sharper. Last night she whispered. Me either, she said, leaning back and drying her hands. In opposition to the rebuttal, Is this an error? Probably, I queried, and she replied, But I'm not prepared to stop. I approached her. She moved slowly and deliberately, not flinching. I could touch her when I got close enough. Looked up at me. We have just 2 days left. That was all we spent, she muttered. The afternoon indoors, such as two individuals who realized there was not much time left. Games, no guilt, no pretending, at least, not yet. I assisted her in cooking, and we joked, kissed softly at first in the kitchen, then, as if we had been waiting for weeks. By the time nightfall arrived, we were snuggled up with a movie on the couch. Her legs were something that neither of us cared about. Her head lay on mine, draped occasionally, softly on my chest. Without saying anything, she would look up and smile. She never requested that I remain in her. She didn't have to go to bed that night. No jazz this time. The house remained silent. Murmured tension, only the brush of our flesh, lowering of our breath, and the type of silence that conveys more information than words. We discussed her quietly in the dark, about how anything may feel to me. At the same moment, I feel both right and wrong. It has been a while since I felt like a woman. She acknowledged that I lacked a clever. In response, I simply squeezed her a bit more. It felt like waking up in the morning after that. We ate breakfast outside in a dream on the porch. One of my shirts was on her. Halfway up the lengthy button, you wouldn't have any guesses regarding what we were supposed to simply by staring at one another, and then we ran. Grocery shopping, little items and errands combined, and everything seemed strangely typical, but every aisle, each gaze from the side carried that same faint spark, as if we were both aware of it. It wasn't long-term, but it was true. When she got home, she put on we danced to her favorite old songs and the giggling in the kitchen as if we hadn't done anything difficult. She took out an old photo albums displayed images of herself as a child, baby pictures about Bobby, and she became silent. You appear depressed, she said. Just be aware of it, when I remarked. I'm not. This cannot continue, she said. I know, I said in a quiet voice, scarcely responding. Over a murmur, she extended her hand, and she lightly ran her fingertips over my cheek that said, "But I wish it could." We sat outside beneath a string that evening. Bobby had hung up the lights earlier. The night was warm in the summer, and she leaned her pressed his head against my shoulder and requested that I tell her about my childhood. So I spoke for a long time, and she paid attention, as nobody had ever had. At midnight, she murmured, "If circumstances had been different." I nodded. I understand. Then Sunday AM arrived. Bobby texted her around, and it hit hard. 9 wow. He stated that he and his pals would be returning in the late afternoon. We both gazed at the display for some time without uttering a. After that, Hannah got out of the "we ought to tidy up the table," went silently through the house, vacuumed and washed laundry every so often, passed one another, a quick look here. There was a handshake, but no kisses. Additional words such as the previous evening. We both knew it was coming to an end before Bobby arrived. I told him I had found it after packing my belongings. A temporary rental via Craigslist isn't a complete fake. Are you certain? He responded. Yeah, figuring it was time I ceased taking advantage of your mother. I believe she enjoyed having you around. I didn't reply here before I departed. Hannah discovered me in the corridor close to the Bobby was upstairs, pulling at the door. She moved in close, but this isn't. It feels like it, she added as she bid farewell. Aaron, you're a decent man. Your throat clenched. I wanted to hold her and kiss her. Something to elegantly wrap everything up. But I just nodded, didn't. Thank you for. She simply looked without smiling at anything. His eyes at me, knowing I wouldn't ignore that. Bobby then slammed down the staircases, and the time we spent together was 3 weeks have gone by since I left there. Time passed slowly at the house where I hired a room. A common area close to where they. Although it wasn't intentional, it was close. Enough for me to occasionally walk by their street while performing errands in an attempt to get my thoughts straight. I hadn't seen Hannah since that final conversation in the corridor, no? No calls, no texts, nothing I expected. Truth, I wasn't sure if she would contact me. If she did, I would answer. I buried me at work, editing films from dawn to dusk, like staying active might suppress her voice in my mind, but it didn't. I was reminded of her by everything. Melody, a well-known aroma, even a chipped coffee cup that was identical to the one she used it each morning. And then one night Bobby texted me. Hey man, Mom said. You want to swing, but you left your charger here. I grabbed it and gazed at the message. Longer than I ought to have, which is funny. I couldn't even recall leaving a. Perhaps I hadn't left the charger there. Recharge. Perhaps she simply needed an excuse. Yes, without a doubt I can stop by tomorrow. Cool, I have class. Until 2, Bobby, I texted. But she'll be home, of course, she said. The following day, I stood outside their door, my heart thumping like a percussion drum. It was as though you were stepping directly into a. I wasn't prepared to revisit that recollection. Hannah knocked and partially opened the door. She appeared, shocked for a moment, then her, hey, she said with a collected, tranquil look, said, come in. I entered. Everything appeared to be the same. Even it had the same scent as if time had not passed. At all, she moved forward and grabbed a charger from the counter in the kitchen. This the one? I gave a nod. The quiet we both spoke about everything we were unable to. How are you? She inquired. All right. I responded that I had been working a lot, and she gave a little sly smirk. Yes, Bobby said. I asked you. And I've been all right. There was. I paused and glanced at the charger in her hand. So, did this actually exist? She looked into my eyes, and I didn't desire anything. To get to that conclusion, I exhaled. Either I or we remained silent for a moment that seemed to go on forever, most likely was. And then she muttered, I've been considering the events surrounding those days. I searched for. Do you? She regrets not responding immediately. I regret. How much I want, she continued. To repeat, that struck more forcefully than I as anticipated. But we can't, she said. Not really. I slowly nodded because I recognized her. Now that the voice was more steady, it was never going to endure. We were only two individuals. He simultaneously needed things. Perhaps, I said. But it wasn't only that. No. But that has softened her expression. I moved a little bit closer to being sufficient. So this is it, she said with a soft smile. Indeed, I did reach into my pocket. A folded sheet of paper being touched by fingers, I wrote you a statement, but I believe I'll keep it. Then she caught me off guard. Not with a kiss, but with a genuine hug. The kind that quietly envelops you, I said. Thank you for seeing me. I hope you find someone who is close to you, gives you the feelings you deserve. I told her to feel, and she drew back her eyes. She said, Glassy, you made me feel that. If only for a brief period of time, I nodded. Goodbye, Hannah. Aaron and I turned in the direction of the door, opened it, and looked back one final time before standing arms wrapped beneath the kitchen light as though she were holding everything in her. I put the pieces together without saying anything else. Word, simply went outside and softly I shut the door after myself. And that was that evening. I lay in my new location. By myself, gazing at the ceiling. No major goodbye. Don't pursue each other. Just a modest final kiss amid the rain, terminating a relationship that wasn't intended to final recollection I knew would endure, than it most likely ought to. But perhaps that's the fact that certain tales don't require a sequel. And perhaps that's just what creates them. A memorable farewell.